Good afternoon, everybody. Thank you for joining us today for our monthly demo of ConsoleWorks. My name is Phil Thomas, Account Manager at TDI. Joining me today is Clyde Paul, our Chief Security Officer. Just a little background on us. TDI Technologies, we've been in business for over 15 years. We're headquartered out of Plano, Texas. ConsoleWorks is a cybersecurity operations platform solving four major problems in IT and OT organizations: automation, compliance, security, and operations, with four major product features: privileged interactive access, asset and configuration monitoring, logging and situational awareness, and endpoint password management. ConsoleWorks is deployed across major industries, including telecommunications, energy, government, financial, and healthcare. Here's an example of some of our customers as well as some of our partners. ConsoleWorks is one platform, one path, connecting people, devices, and access. I'm going to pass you over to Clyde Paul now.
Good afternoon. So we have on this slide a very high-level view of ConsoleWorks and its functionality. ConsoleWorks sits in the middle with connectivity to the many devices, all the things that you see at the bottom of this slide. It doesn't really matter whether it's a server or a storage device or a virtual machine or an application. And this allows, by authenticating into ConsoleWorks, any kind of user, whether it's a privileged user or a non-privileged user, to access those devices through ConsoleWorks. At the same time, that connectivity between ConsoleWorks and those devices allows for privileged interactive access and asset and configuration monitoring, logging and situational awareness, and endpoint password management. Again, it's all because of the connectivity from ConsoleWorks to those devices. And along with that, that allows us to integrate with other third-party applications, like an incident response system, or compliance reporting, or many other things. We're going to do a demonstration now, but I want to tell everyone that we're going to allow for questions. If you have questions that you would like us to try to address, please use the chat system or send email to sales@tditechnologies.com, and either we will address them at the end if there is time, or we will make sure that an appropriate person addresses your question sometime in the next day or so. So now I'm going to move on to the demonstration. ConsoleWorks uses industry standard web browsers as its user interface because part of the goal of ConsoleWorks is not to require you to install software. We can integrate with your favorite authentication methods, and that includes Active Directory and two-factor authentication systems like RSA or Secure Auth. It really doesn't matter, but the idea is that you authenticate into ConsoleWorks to get access to the various devices. And then because of the password management in ConsoleWorks, ConsoleWorks can be the middleman between you and the privileged user access of target systems. So for example, I can go to our graphical user interface, and I could connect to a Windows system. And what ConsoleWorks is going to do is it's going to present what looks like an RDP session to me using web browser technology. ConsoleWorks is actually going to establish an RDP session behind this from the ConsoleWorks server to a target system and present it to me this way. The most important thing about this, you may have noticed, was I did not provide a username or a password during this connection process. The idea is that ConsoleWorks is managing that privileged interactive access. ConsoleWorks has the username and the password, and we are managing that password on that endpoint system as well. And we can do that in such a way that ConsoleWorks can change passwords on a schedule or on demand while still keeping those passwords secret, even from the people who log into ConsoleWorks. Additionally, because of the way that we're making these connections, we can have situational awareness on systems. I just connected to a virtual machine on this particular box. In a moment, I'm going to show you how my starting that virtual machine gave me situational awareness in the user interface about my connecting. But just to show you a little bit more about that connection and managing usernames and passwords, I can connect to that exact same machine and have it actually prompt for a username and password. So I have a choice about whether I actually manage passwords or I don't. The situational awareness I was talking about is actually managed by what we call events. And I'm going to show you some event occurrences that just happened. And you can see here, these event occurrences are a direct result of my having started that virtual machine on that Windows system. I can also connect these events to the recording I made of that connection to that RDP desktop, and that allows for auditing for security purposes so that you actually know who did what on a particular system. I can do very similar things with command line interfaces to systems. If I go to this interface called console, I can connect to a Cisco router, for example. And when I connect to that router, ConsoleWorks is going to present me with a terminal emulator. Again, notice that there was no username and password. It's because ConsoleWorks is maintaining ownership of that username and password, and I've been given a non-privileged account in this particular case to this particular router. And so to demonstrate how we're keeping track of what any person does on any particular system, we're logging what everyone does. I've just typed some, garbage strings, if you will, and with those garbage strings, I can now close this window, which disconnects me, and I can go back to that Cisco 2501 in this interface. I can press logs, pick today, and if I scroll to the bottom of the log, you can see here's where I connect it to the device. Here's where I disconnect it from the device. And you can see all of the things in between that I typed. So I have logged everything that was going on this particular system while I was connected. In addition to that, this particular device is configured such that there's an always connected connection between ConsoleWorks and the target system. And this indication here with a log file timestamp every hour is to show you that during those hours, the logging system was in effect, but nothing was happening on the console of this particular device. So this means that even when someone is not connected, we can be monitoring this system and we can have situational awareness of this system at all times. Also, we are performing a security hash on these devices so that if someone were to attempt or successfully modify one of these log files, we could tell that the log file had been modified after it had been written so that you can detect those kinds of security breaches, or you can say with authority, if this hash is intact, that no one has modified a contemporary record. This always up connection mechanism, or the ability to connect with an appropriately privileged account, also allows us to automate collection of configuration information on assets. And in this particular case, on this particular asset, we are doing what is called baselining of this device. We, at regular intervals that are scheduled, you can see here it says baseline plus schedules, we are checking for configuration information on this device. And every day when we collect that data, we are comparing that data with an already established baseline. And when we gather the information, we get something that looks like this, where we actually have the entire configuration of this Cisco router, and we collect, in the case of the Cisco router, several other things as well. And when we compare these one at a time against each other, we can detect that someone may have changed the configuration of a system. So let me show you what I mean by that. Again, I'm going to go to the event system, and I'm going to look at currently active events, and I'm going to filter for events on that Cisco router. And I'm going to look down here, and I see that there's an event called BCM different. That means that something has changed in the baseline configuration of this system. And you can see there that it says something in the configuration was different from the time that it was run last night at about 10 o'clock. And the last time we said, here is what the configuration should actually be. So if I wanted to know what the difference was, I can actually go into the details of this event. I can say, view the differences between the baseline and today. And when I do that, I can see right away someone had changed the host name of that Cisco router from router to foo. Pretty obvious change, but it might have gone undetected if no one had ever checked. That's a pretty innocuous change. It doesn't really hurt anything. But what if someone had turned off one of your connections out of that router, or changed a firewall rule? That's the sort of thing that the BCM difference is going to detect, and whatever at whatever cycle you might want it to detect. So what we've talked about here so far is we talked about the 4 items that Phil had mentioned. We talked about the fact that ConsoleWorks can be the owner of usernames and passwords, but it can also allow you to use a known username and password. ConsoleWorks is going to be able to provide privileged interactive access both at the RDP level, the GUI level, and at the command line level. And we're going to be able to manage passwords on your systems. We're going to log things, and we're going to provide situational awareness. And of course, that last, we talked about the ability to monitor the configurations of systems. So given what we've just talked about now, I want to go back to Phil now. And Phil, I don't know, do we get any questions?
Yeah, we got quite a few sent in. So firstly, thanks to everybody for sending them in. And if we're not going to be able to answer them all today, so we will make sure we get back to you and answer those. But I wanted to start with quite a good question, Clyde. How does ConsoleWorks help me with my SIP compliance?
Wow, SIP compliance, really good question. Right now, with the currently in place versions of the SIP regulations in the power industry, we primarily can assist with SIP 5, SIP 7, and SIP 10. Going forward, with the additional SIP requirements and some renumbering, if you will, we'll continue with SIP 5, SIP 7, SIP 10, but we'll also probably include SIP 11 as one of the things that we can assist with. We can monitor for some of the things that are required to be monitored, and we can report on many of the things that are required to be reported upon. For example, the login and log out reports that are required and the login failure reports that are required are all things that are within the functionality of the ConsoleWorks application when it's been applied correctly at a power industry customer.
Okay, great. Hopefully that answers it. Next question. We are virtualizing all of our servers. Can ConsoleWorks operate in a virtual environment?
Oh, good. Right. Great. Another good question. Love these kind. So think of ConsoleWorks as just an application that runs on an operating system. It runs equally well on Windows, Linux, and Solaris. And if you take a piece of hardware that's running the operating system and install ConsoleWorks, it's exactly the same as installing ConsoleWorks on an operating system running on a virtual machine. You do have to maybe make sure that some of the configuration of that machine has good memory allocations and such, but that is certainly something that we can help a customer understand, and there's no problem. But the other side of that too is that as you virtualize more of your servers, you need to monitor and manage those in exactly the same way that you monitor and manage the hardware today. And ConsoleWorks does that extremely well. We integrate very well with VMware, but it works well with Hyper-V and several other virtualization platforms as well.
Okay, and lastly, I'm going to finish with this. We have multiple sites across the country. Does ConsoleWorks have to be centrally located or put at each site?
You're going to love this question. The answer is yes. Which means that you can run ConsoleWorks as a centralized monitoring and management system as long as you have good network connectivity to all of the various sites. And we have customers that do that. On the other hand, you may have weak network connectivity, or you may have other reasons where actually having ConsoleWorks run at each site makes more sense. And so you can do that as well. And then thirdly, you can have a mixture of those where you have ConsoleWorks at individual sites and then ConsoleWorks as what I'll call a roll-up kind of thing at a central site where you have situational awareness at the central site, but you also have the ability to deal with systems directly at each of the remote sites.
Again, thank you for those questions. That wraps things up for today. Again, thank you for the questions. Thank you everybody for joining. Please attend and register for our upcoming webinars. September 14th, which is going to be specific to the energy industry with our partners Archer. And then we have another ConsoleWorks demo on October 26th. If you would like a specific demo to your environment, please go ahead and contact us, sales@tditechnologies.com, and we can set something up. Again, thank you everybody, and have a great day.